Hello, friends. Welcome to the first of our discussions of the world we live in and the universe that encloses it. What I'd like you to be thinking about is the difference in the first instance between science and religion, doubt and belief. There's such a dramatic difference between science and religion that we shouldn't really be interfacing with each other in the form of anger or argument. Belief involves faith. It's a faith in something being true. Now, obviously, in order to need to believe in something, it has to, on the surface, seem untrue. On the other hand, in the case of science, thoughts begin with doubt. The idea behind science is that we're trying to find out what's true, and we hope we get closer to that as we proceed, but we never quite get there because we're seeing with these eyes, feeling with these hands, hearing with these ears, and the extensions that our inventiveness has helped us to create for those faculties. We're trying to get to a more true version of how things are, but we'll never actually get there because we're always approaching from limited angles that we try to make larger and larger. Now, the person in science who most recently extended our understanding of things most radically is probably Albert Einstein. And we'll talk about him. But at the moment, I'd like to talk about the origins of the universe to the extent that we now think we understand them in relation to the first section of the Hebrew Bible. Genesis 1:1, which I think has been largely misunderstood by people of faith. Now, in general, people of faith usually believe that God is an infinite being with utter wisdom, complete understanding, who sees the universe as if it's space. That is to say, this divinity can see time that was, time that is, and time that will be, as if it's looking at a map of all things. Well, we don't think to ourselves that if such a divinity exists, why are there such horrific things happening in the world? Why is there prejudice against people whose skin color is different from ours? Why is there prejudice against people whose belief structures are different from ours? Why can't we see that we're all striving to know better what's going on in this universe. And those of us with belief believe that our particular version of things is right. But other people with beliefs believe that their versions of things are right. What I would like us to be able to do, those of us who are believers, is say, this is my version, and you are striving with your version. I prefer mine, but I acknowledge and accept yours. Oh. Now, some believers want to say to the people of science, you believe that your approach. No, the fundamental element of science is not belief. It's in fact doubt. When Isaac Newton, who in many ways started modern science, using mathematics as it fits onto the world, with the help of Kepler, who came about 50, 60, 70 years before he was working, before Newton was working, that is to say, using Kepler, he came up with some principles. And he actually believed that those principles were the utter truth. Newton, in fact, was a religious person. He wrote more about the Bible than he wrote about science. Many people don't know that. But he thought that the physics that he was working out, cosmological answers to how things are in the universe, he thought that what he was doing was opening out to people an understanding of how God went about organizing the universe. Whoa. He came up with the idea of gravity being the instantaneous attraction between things. Fighting against a kind of inertia, a kind of condition in which objects in the universe wanted to move in a straight line, were moving in a straight line. So you had the sun, and you had the earth wanting to move in a straight line around it. But the gravity of the sun pulls the earth toward it. And so that straight line is compromised, and the earth goes on trying to go in a straight line, but continually pulled by gravity towards the sun, and therefore cycling around the sun. A brilliant idea. He took it to be true, and he actually was able to create the nature of those cycles of all of the planets around the sun. Whoa. Indeed, later astronomers saw that the outer cycles weren't quite exact. They were slightly off in some places. Newton was by then dead. But they said the reason they're slightly off is there's probably a planet beyond that one. And that's why There's a gravitational pull outward. And they found the other planets of our solar system by that manner. They focused their telescopes on the spot where a planet ought to be, giving the warp in the cycle, and found planets. Wonderful. For them, that proved that Newton was absolutely right. And then, at the beginning of the 20th century, first with a work that's ultimately going to be called special relativity, Einstein figured out that time isn't a straight sequence that stays the same. That in fact, it slows down when things speed up. Does that make sense? Most of us, even now, struggle with that concept. Moreover, as things speed up, mass gets more dense. He finds this out as a very young man. He's 24 years old in 1905. He comes up with these ideas that many physicists in his day say are nonsense. They don't make sense. But he's moved to do that by an explanation that other physicists had come up with for the strange behavior of light. Well, what's the strange behavior of light? Well, we know that if a train is moving at 60 miles an hour, and we are great baseball players, and we throw a baseball from the train moving at 60 and the baseball moving at 100 miles an hour would produce a movement of 160 miles an hour seen by someone standing at the track. That makes sense. If indeed the baseball were thrown backwards, then we would say minus the speed of the baseball. But light doesn't obey that rule. If you are on a train and you light a flashlight forward, the light travels at the speed of light. It doesn't travel at the speed of light plus the speed of the train. How can that be true? Scientists in the 19th century, after the measurement of the speed of light had been developed, came up with an explanation. They said, it seems to us that light is traveling through space, but it's not. It's traveling through a different medium called the luminiferous ether. It's a specific kind of atmospheric area, call it a field, through which light travels. And the luminiferous ether has the characteristic of moving backwards if things are moving forward, always moving in the opposite direction of whatever is moving. And so when light is shot in the direction of, let's say, that train moving forward, it moves through the luminiferous ether, which moves at a speed of minus the speed of the train, and therefore the speed of light stays the same. Einstein is 24 years old. This explanation is widely accepted. He says, if you come up with an explanation of something that actually has no proof of its existence, except that it explains why something happens, it's false. Oh, what a huge idea that 24-year-old young man comes up with in 1905. Amazing. And so he says, no, on the contrary, the point is that light travels at the speed of time. They are united. How hard is that for you to put your head around? There's, of course, no proof of that at the time. There are physicists working on that matter who might have come up with the explanation eventually, but he comes up with it. And moreover, his recognition that mass becomes more dense as things speed up, as light slows down as things speed up, tells you that there's an actual relationship between mass and the speed of light. And he works that out in 1905, publishes one essay about why light travels at the same speed in vacuum. And why mass gets more dense, and writes an additional paper showing that, in fact, there's a direct relationship between the speed of light and mass in the form of the production of energy. He comes up with a little formula that you know, many of you. E equals mc squared. Actually, the formula has something under the line, but it's so small that it doesn't matter. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Light is very fast. 186,000 miles a second. Whoa. Squared times itself. Mass times that squared gives you energy. He's 24 years old. What proof is there of that? We have proof now. We got it very dramatically when the atomic bomb was created. Out of a little bit of mass, we killed hundreds of thousands of people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, destroying vast areas of both cities. Whoa. Now, in a more positive sense, we can make electricity by controlled fissioning, and we're trying to figure out how to do it by fusing. Indeed, it has been done in a non-applicable way in our time. Amazing. And we now, enlarging our capacity to see into the universe, have created telescopes that we thrust up into the air millions of miles away from us and are able to see things that happened light years away from us. The distance that light travels in a year, when we've just said that light travels 186,000 miles in a second. Whoa. The sun is 93 million miles away from us. It takes about 8 minutes for light to travel that 93 million miles and reach the Earth. Whoa. On the other hand, remember I kept saying light speed in vacuum is that for the light to get out of the central area of the sun to the outside from which it shoots across the solar system to us in 8 minutes, it takes about 20,000 years because it keeps being deflected by hitting things inside the sun as it's trying to get out. Whoa, amazing. One of the things that I'd like to do today to illustrate the amazing insight, one, is talk about the vision of the created universe, the universe being created in Genesis 1:1. Now, those of you who are believers believe, many of you, that the Bible is a seamless entity. The Hebrew Bible is one thing. Well, it is one thing. But there are different styles. And the style in which this section of Genesis is written seems to suggest that it was written somewhere between 800 and 500 BCE, before the common measurement of time. And it begins with a vision of the universe beginning. First sentence, Bereshit bara Elohim et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz. In the beginning, Bereshit. Some current scholars want to say when, but it really doesn't matter. When, in the beginning, Bereshit bara, in the beginning, Elohim, in the beginning, God created et ha-shamayim, the heavens, the et haaretz, and the earth. What was before the beginning? You might want to say, well, God was before the beginning, but God can't have been before the beginning because the beginning is the beginning. Whoa. So the beginning involves a creative force, the text says. Et hashamayim, the heavens first, the et haaretz, and the earth. That's in fact in agreement with our present cosmic physics, which wants to say before the start of the universe, there was nothing. And the word nothing is not empty enough for them. And when we think of nothing, we think of just empty space and time going on. But they want to say before the start of the universe, there wasn't empty space and there wasn't time. There was so much nothing that it was not anything. Oh, try to stretch your mind to accept that. Not anything. That's in coordination with the idea of God starting creation in the beginning. Before in the beginning, there was no beginning. There was not anything. When Einstein comes to write general relativity, to which he's led by the recognition when he was 24 years old that Newton had to be wrong when he said there's instantaneous attraction between objects in space. Instantaneous is faster than the speed of light. And nothing, Einstein had calculated, is faster than the speed of light. Because the speed of light in vacuo is the speed of time, which can slow down as things speed up. The speed of time is 0. Whoa. Einstein is so widely intellectual that many, I would even say most of his experiments, science involves experiments, are conceptual experiments. And he illustrates for you the speed of light being the speed of time by saying, and he first thought of this as a youngster, as a teenager actually, what would happen if you sat on a beam of light moving away from a clock? You sat on that beam of light moving away from the clock at 3 o'clock, let's say. What time would it be for you An hour later, for somebody sitting on a chair watching what's happening. An hour later, it would still be 3 o'clock because the light from that beam is going along with you, and that's all you see. Whoa. And that leads the young giant to say, there are various perceptions of things in the world, in the universe, depending upon the position from which you see them. If someone on a train drops a rock, the person on the train sees the rock falling at about the same speed as the train. Oh. So the rocks fall straight down for that person. But that person we thought of sitting near the train tracks actually sees the rock falling at an angle towards the ground, a kind of parabola almost. Yeah. Which of those is true? They're both what the people who were in the position they were in saw. True for her or him, and true for him or her. Observed. And ultimately, when he writes general relativity, when he thinks it up, he says, things don't exist, and space is something. It doesn't exist until there are two things, and space is what's between those two things. Moreover, time doesn't exist until there's space. And so time and space are linked. Space, time, space, they're linked. And they produce, they are a field between objects. And they're made to curve around those objects. And depending upon whether they're near the object or further from the object, there's a greater tendency for them to fall. And that's what we experience as gravity, falling along those curves, if you will, and calling them curves and so on is a way of conceptualizing it for ourselves. And so there are more than two objects in space. There's the sun, there's the moon, there are the various stars. Oh my goodness gracious. All that leads us to a universe in which things are happening, things are changing. And this brings us back conceptually to that, I want to call him a proto-scientist, the author of Genesis 1:1. First, God created the heavens and the earth, an imperfect creation. Haaretz hayata tohu avohel v'shochesh al pnei tam. And the earth was deep and empty, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And so that ruach, that breath, that spirit, that's God, says, let there be light. And there was light. Now, some of us remember reading that. That's not a direct statement, it's a metaphor. What's a metaphor? The idea that God used words. Can you give me the name of something that doesn't exist? No, names are attached to things that exist. So when we say God used the word light, let there be light, that's a metaphor. It stands for the creation. The creative entity. Indeed, at the start of the book of John in the New Testament, the author writes, in the beginning was the Word, God said, right? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Whoa. The text then goes off into the story of God creating a son and all of that, which some of us believe is right. And obviously, I am not a believer of that. But that conception of divinity being a creative entity, the word stands for what's created, in fact. Whoa, magnificent. And indeed, this God, this creative force, God actually is, of course, a job. It's not a name. God's name isn't God. It's what God does that is a God. Jewish people believe that God actually has a name. And indeed, when they translated the Bible into English, the first name of God they came up with was Jehovah, trying to translate the letters. Well, now they don't think Jehovah is correct. They think Yahweh is the correct way. But for people who believe, neither Jehovah nor Yahweh is a correct pronunciation. If anyone dared to use the correct pronunciation, knew it, chaos would be loosened on the world. We can't say that name, according to believers. Whatever. The point is, divinity is creation in the highest sense. And this author, for me, of Genesis 1:1, one of the priests, is actually a darn good proto-scientist. God separates the waters from the land. According to our vision of the start of the earth, originally there was just one section of land in the water. So, and we can see that it was probably so. South America is shaped in such a manner as to fit right into Africa. They are twisted in ways that come together if you push them together. And we now think that there was one land area. But let that rest. This astonishing author goes through a series of improvements of the imperfect world, inanimate. And after going through that series of improvements of an inanimate world, turns to the creation of life, which we too think came into existence later. And like us, the author of Genesis 1:1 thinks life began in the sea. That the sea, with its minerals and dissolved oxygen and so on, would be a cordial place for simple forms of life to begin. The author has God create plants and fishes in the sea. And he also thinks birds in the air. And you and I might say, oh, well, birds are much later. And of course they are. But in his mind, up in the sky, it's water. It's blue. And it rains. There's water up there. He's right. Well, we have a different explanation of how the water is up there, but we too believe there's water up there, not for birds to fly through. But his mistake is a kind of humorous, acceptable one. And then God creates plants and creatures on the land. And here too, the creation moves up to more complex creatures until God creates humanity. Do I dare to say that this explanation of living creation is Darwinian? Creatures in the sea and plants in the sea, to plants on earth and creatures on earth. And they get more sophisticated until you reach the creation of the final creature at this time, and that's humanity. And here too, the author of Genesis 1:1 shows amazing perspicuity. Because he wants to give women an equal place to men. Many of us are still struggling to deal with that thought that women are in fact the equals of men. Emotionally different from us, men, but emotionally valid and intellectually able to do what men do. Are women able to do mathematics? I actually love that question because the answer for it is not to be found on looking to either side of yourself, but by looking back. The greatest mathematician about 400 or so CE was a woman named Hypatia. You can look her up. Christianity had come into existence, but she was not a Christian. Her father was also a great mathematician, and he was a pagan. He was a believer in Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. She didn't believe in that either. She believed in science, in mathematics, and was ultimately killed by the Christians for her beliefs, something she thought would not happen. She tried to reason with everyone. Can women do mathematics? Yes, back there in 400 years CE, Hypatia of Alexandria. She was down in Alexandria, Egypt, which Alexander the Great had conquered. That's why it's called Alexandria. And did magnificent mathematics. Oh. Well, we won't go down the whole story of Hypatia, though it's a fascinating one. We don't know everything about her, but we know a few things. In any case, the author of Genesis 1:1 sees God creating humanity, and he has a problem in conveying that. What's the problem? The general word for humanity at the time, just as the general word for humanity not too long ago in our time, was a male word. Man. Man means humankind. We even tend to say man means mankind. Everybody. Well, that's not quite acceptable. It's not quite right. It's humankind. And so the author of Genesis 1:1 writes, and on the sixth day, the last creature created, God created man. And that doesn't satisfy him. So he says, man and woman, he created him. And that doesn't quite do it. He says, man and woman, he created them. He goes through those 3 steps to say humanity is an interweaving of male and female. Whoa. Well, in our time, we have a wide variety of genders, people who are gay, people who are lesbian, people who are combinations of a variety of things. The creation is not a simple thing. In his day, that wasn't something that they were overly concerned with, though the issue of being gay or being lesbian was there, but he doesn't take that up. Man and woman, he created him. Man and woman, he created them. Put them into the universe, put them into the world to control and improve the conditions there as the divinity had controlled and improved the conditions in the universe. Amazing, beautiful. Those of us who believe, of course, don't take that section in the manner in which I take it. They're led by their rabbis and priests and ministers and mullahs to pay closer attention to the last element of Genesis 1:1. And so after 6 days, the universe was complete. And on the seventh day, God rested. Oh, that's why we rest on the seventh day. For the Jewish people, the seventh day being Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 7 days. And for the Jewish people, in their history going back, Saturday begins when it gets dark. It doesn't arbitrarily begin at some time called 12 o'clock. It begins when day disappears. And so Friday night, what we call Friday night, is for them Saturday. And on the seventh day, God rested. Well, the Christians then make the seventh day Sunday, trying to have something different from the Jews. And the Muslims make the seventh day real Friday, trying to have something different from the Jews and the Christians, and so on. We don't have to worry about that set of belief structures in this context. We're talking about an astonishing realm of ideas, which we'll be talking about next time. Good friends, thank you for being with me this day. I'll see you next time.